Okay, well, let's move on. We're going to bring up our guest speaker, and I think probably everyone in this room knows who Tracy Edge is. He is a South Carolina State Representative, District 105, and let's give, or 104, I'm sorry, and let's give Tracy a big welcome.
Let me talk about me for a minute. Many of you, as I can see, I've known for quite some time. Some of you I've met before, and some of you have not met before. My name's Tracy Edge. I'm in the South Carolina House of Representatives from the North Myrtle Beach, Little River area, and I almost go to Loris. I wish I would have brought a map. That probably would have been helpful, but I have been in the House for 16 years. I originally did represent Loris and went out toward Green Sea, but reapportionment has cut me back to where I go about 3 miles from downtown Loris itself. But I've represented North Myrtle Beach and Little River, Longs, the area around where Highway 22 and Highway 90 meet, going out to 905 and 22, and then I cut back toward Loris. And it covers about 1/6 of the county, and approximately 38 or 39,000 people now. Each of our House districts after reapportionment covers about 38 to 40,000. And in terms of registered voters, I believe that we have 21 or 22,000 now, which is, again, since reapportionment, everybody's got about the same. But I had the 4th fastest growing House district when it came time to redraw the line. So I lost quite a bit of territory and probably about 10,000 registered voters. When I got elected in 1996, the first 4 years that I was in office led up to the reapportionment of 2000, and I had 15,100 voters in 1996. By April of 2000, I had 25,500. So phenomenal growth. Tom Keegan had a district that grew faster than mine. I think he may have had the fastest growing district at that time. But when you combine the growth here in Carolina Forest, the growth in North Myrtle Beach, the northern part of Myrtle Beach and Little River, and the South Myrtle Beach to Garden City, then you can see why Horry County is growing at a phenomenal rate and why we have a brand new House district centered in this area. This is the second reapportionment in a row that we've added a House district, and I think we probably will next time as well. What I asked the sheets of paper to pass out is a brief biographical sketch of me. I've lived in North Myrtle Beach all my life. I'm living in the house that I was born and raised in. Haven't gone very far. I don't know if I could ever leave this part of the world. I've traveled a good bit, but this is home, and I think I'm going to stay here as long as people have me, and as long as people vote to re-elect me to office. I enjoy serving very, very much, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been able to do since that time in 1996. Prior to that, though, I served on City Council in North Myrtle Beach for 2 years. Started in 1994. Harold Worley was the House member prior to me in District 104. He decided after filing that he was going to run against Strom Thurmond. I thought at that time that he would probably drop out of the House race pretty soon after he announced he was running for the Senate, and he did. So we had an emergency filing period that lasted all of 24 hours. I filed. There was a Democrat that had already filed for the seat. So off to the races we went. Now back at that time, my district was not a solid Republican seat or even a leaning Republican seat really at the time. To tell you the truth, I think I was the first Republican ever elected in that seat. So it was a time of a lot of change here in Horry County. Tom Keegan, coming from the Surfside area, was elected as a Republican and had a Republican predecessor. But at that time, we just didn't have that many that had come out of Horry County until the mid to late 80s, when we started growing just a little bit and gained a foothold. Once I got elected into the district became solidly Republican. I don't know if we converted the Democrats or if they quit participating, but over the course of time, all of the people that represented the North Myrtle Beach, Little River, Longs area who may have had Democratic representation in different offices all became Republican over the course of 2 or 3 elections. The growth at that time, obviously fueled by people who were moving in here from other places. And we welcome it because that growth has led to phenomenal growth for Republicans in this part of the world. That's why when a candidate running for governor, such as Nikki Haley, looks at where the votes are, she obviously sees, after getting 70–71% of Horry County, that this is an important place to be, an important place to campaign, and believe me, that's not lost on any other candidate. They know that Horry County is definitely the place to be. After, as I said, my second year on City Council in North Myrtle Beach, and Harold Worley dropped out of the House race, I was fortunate enough to get elected in a pretty good margin in 1996, considering that was the second year that, or rather the second term that Bill Clinton was elected in. We actually didn't fare too well, though, in Horry County in that election. Since then, we've gone on to have record numbers of victories in terms of percentages. I think in 2000, we won 19 out of 20 contested races in this county off the Republican ticket. And suddenly you began to see the Democrats weren't filing for office anymore. They, unfortunately, though, were changing their coats in the middle of the night and coming over to the Republican Party, which is a problem that we have even today. Talk about some things that I've tried to do in the House that have been hindered and hampered by these party switchers. School choice. I was the main sponsor for school choice for about 5.5, near 6 years. Why, in a state like South Carolina, as solid as a Republican state as we have, can we not pass school choice in our General Assembly? In a state where nationally Democrats don't even think they can contest any of the national races, they don't think they can elect a U.S. Senator any longer, they don't believe that a Democrat candidate for president needs to even come into South Carolina. Why, in that scenario, can we not pass school choice in South Carolina? The first couple of years that we were pushing the bill, we actually got a bill up for a vote one time, and we were killed on a procedural motion. But what happened? Why did we lose the vote? We had 8 to 10 Republicans that absolutely refused to go along with school choice. They sided with the Democrats, they sided with the South Carolina Education Association, which is, lack of a better word, the Teachers Union of South Carolina, and they absolutely slammed the door on choice. Yet, our neighboring state of Georgia, which Democrats can penetrate any day, any time, passed school choice. They passed it, I believe, 5 years ago. School choice is not the only issue that we've struggled with because of party switchers. You all remember the Kelo case in the Supreme Court, which was about 7 or 8 years ago? Kelo dealt with private property rights. And after the Kelo case, we were able to pass a bill in South Carolina which dealt with regulatory takings. Basically, we said that there is not a cause that is good enough for the public to trample on one's property rights. But yet, again, as conservative as the state as we are, we struggled to pass a property rights bill that at its lowest magnitude just gave property owners some procedural protections that they did not have before. all that the government was required to do prior to that bill was say, we're condemning that piece of property. And from then on, the property owner had very little rights. They had very little of place to stand, because government, under the laws at that time, could trample any rights that a property owner dared think that he or she may have. Well, here again, we have a bill that would solidly make property rights something that a property owner could use the law and have it on their side, protect themselves against runaway government, runaway growth, but also government that had unlimited powers. Yet we could not pass that bill in the South Carolina House for the same reasons that school choice could not pass and has not passed yet. We still have a number of people in key leadership positions who are former Democrats or liberals who have changed their coats again in the middle of the night to simply get elected and to hold elective office and to maintain themselves in that office. It's frustrating for people like me who want to see change and want to see it now. It's ridiculous that we can't get change like we need being in a state like South Carolina. Several years ago, though, I started thinking about what could we do to try to bridge the gap and make sure that the conservative principles that our voters had would translate, correlate into the type of candidates that we helped get elected to the South Carolina House. One thing that we did just in our own little backyard was create the North Myrtle Beach Republican Club. And it wasn't created in any way to take anything away from the county party. Instead, it was to try to provide support for candidates who wanted to run for office from our area, who obviously the county party at times was stretched thin with a number of races, 20-25 on the ballot at any given time. So we wanted to have a club in our area that could focus on the 2 or 3 races that we had in our area. And some other clubs started coming up in other parts of the county for the same purpose. Well, we've been successful in that effort, in the sense that we've got Republicans elected to other offices in our area. And the reason that we've had to do that is because we did not want to let an opportunity slip by where someone could get elected just by virtue of naming themselves a Republican. That wasn't good enough. We wanted to be sure that they were vetted and that they would serve the people in a conservative manner should they be elected. Well, this past election was the first primary that I've ever had, and I actually found my own club coming out against me. How about that? That was something interesting to deal with, but it showed some of the internal issues that we're having to deal with here in not only North Myrtle Beach but countywide. My house race at that time during this primary was not just about me getting reelected. It was more about the future of North Myrtle Beach. There were people who were on certain sides in that race that may not have ever really thought much about House Seat 104. However, that race was a linchpin for things to come. Who was going to have influence in our area? Were we going to have a process, methodology, support group to elect conservative candidates in the future? Or were we going to get overruled and pushed back to the back and not be able to see that the way that we believe government should operate would actually be in place? The reason that's important for us in our area in North Myrtle Beach was that we had 3 property tax increases in 4 years. Yet the city had budget surpluses of $1 million a year. So government, a conservative government at that, does not just begin at the State House level. It's even lower than that into the local areas such as city council, school board, any other local office that you can think of. And that's why I'm glad to see groups like this come about, because not only does it help the right candidates get elected, you're also doing a whole lot to show people who are even thinking about running for office that if they're not conservative, they're going to have a problem on their hands, and they better be sure that if they run, that they have the ideas that they need to have to serve all of us like they should. In the State House, we, as I said, still battle party switchers. Even on the Ways and Means Committee that I serve on, 3 of the subcommittee chairmen, of which we have 6, originally served in the legislature as Democrats. Now, have they changed their philosophy? No, I doubt it. They've just changed the party in which they go file in front of. But yet, people like me who push the ideology, push conservative principles every day, wake up one day and realize we're not just fighting Democrats or liberals, but we're actually having to fight, argue people in our own party. And that's unfair for you, it's unfair for me, it's unfair for people who have toiled in the trenches to try to get the right people elected over the years. But that is the reason why I've continued to seek office and continue to maintain my seat in the House, because I want to see school choice, I want to see regulatory takings tackled, I want to see us reorganize our budgeting process. I want to see us keep from allowing Obamacare and Medicaid to explode. About for just a few minutes. I've served as the subcommittee chairman on appropriations for health care for 7 years. Obamacare, in the first full year of implementation, which would have been 2014, well, I say would be, we're still not sure where that's going to go yet. The first full year of its implementation would cost South Carolina $663 million. Let me try to put that in some perspective. We have a budget that is in or around $6 billion. Every year, Medicaid, for the past, say, 8 to 10 years, has grown as an expense to government, like any other area. Law enforcement, for instance, has to battle the cost of new police cars going up, the cost of gas going up, supplies, suppliers, you name it. Well, healthcare obviously is no different. But we've had to look at an increase of about $100 million just to maintain Medicaid where it is for the prior year to the next year. Obamacare comes along, and suddenly, in ramping up to its full implementation, this past year, we had to find $310 million in new funds just to maintain our Medicaid program where it was in the prior year. Then you come to the first full year of implementation, knocking at our door, and you're suddenly trying to find $663 million. Where does that money come from? Well, if you have a year where there's very little growth, then we have to go in and cut the budget in other areas in order to find that funding. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with health care in our state budget? 10 years ago, health care only encompassed 19% of our budget in South Carolina. Today, it's 34%. Now, when education encompasses about 50% of our budget, health care is climbing up to 34%. That leaves 16% to cover everything else in state government, from prisons to tourism marketing, corrections, as I said, law enforcement, court system, you name it. Everything else is fighting for a piece of that 16%. And if healthcare continues to grow at the rate that we're looking at, then suddenly that 16% is going to go down, 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 further and further. What happens? What do we cut to provide funding for Medicaid? Well, we just about cut every other aspect of state government, including, say, the building of highways, all to fund the federal mandates brought upon us by Obamacare. All of that. The first regulatory change that we had to face from Obamacare was the impact on our state health plan, which allowed dependents to stay on their parents' health care coverage for 3 more years. That alone costs us $20 million. The point that I'm getting at here is that for those who think that Obamacare is a great thing and that it's the manna from heaven, need to look at the cost of what the early programs that need to be expanded to comply with the law are costing us. We can't afford it. We can't fund it. What will happen if we continue? We basically will defund everything else related to state government other than education. So we'll be a state government that does 2 things. It educates our people and provides health care for them, but does very little else. The only way anything else can be covered, expanded, perhaps even in the future, would be to raise taxes or find some other source of revenue. That's why, if we don't win the election this fall and Obama's not taken out of office, we in South Carolina are going to face a crisis in our state government. We're going to face a crisis in terms of what do we do in the future? What can we do in the future with the limited resources that we have? What are you going to want us to do? As I said, essentially we're boiling government down to 2 functions, healthcare and education. However, if Obamacare can be eliminated, then we can go back in terms of seeing just the minimum increases that we've had over the years, which have been 40, 50, 60 million, just to cover the basic health care costs that we've seen. So the effect on our state budget in South Carolina from Washington is tremendous. The first 8 years that I was in the legislature, I didn't worry about the federal government one bit when it came to maintaining, running the government of South Carolina. For the past 8 years, we've been unable to pass our budget until we get direction from Washington for what we're allowed to do because of the mandates of Obamacare and other education funding that we've had. We can't pass a budget unless we know that we're complying with the mandates that are given upon us. So the change that we've had just in the past few years due to Obama being elected has been tremendous. No longer are we a sovereign state, if you will, anymore. We are not the state as a state was envisioned in the Constitution. We're not a state as states were thought of 30 or 40 years ago. We are a state that cannot function unless we are given the direction from Washington on how we proceed for most of the items that we spend money on. And that's just wrong. And that's why I come back to this. That's why this group is very important. That's why a little club in North Myrtle Beach is very important, because we've got to start building conservative values and principles at the bottom, as close to the people as possible. We're not able to do it if we just aim for Congress or we aim for the state Senate. We've got to do it for every office that we elect someone to, because if we don't, then the liberals will get a foothold in place. I'll tell you just a little bit more about me, and I want to open it up for questions. I've enjoyed serving in the House over the years. For 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 years ago, I was in a pretty good position, being in charge of healthcare policy and budgeting in this state is a pretty good thing to have. It was very interesting to me. It's a pretty powerful position in terms of having someone in the right place that can grab the reins of spending, particularly in healthcare, and say, well, wait a minute, we can't go expanding everything in the world. Because once you expand a program in Medicaid, you're not allowed under Obamacare or other federal laws to undo it. And that's part of the problem that we've got. If we proceed with Obamacare and we don't opt out, we can never cut anything in the program from here on out. So we suddenly are riding a galloping horse that doesn't know where it's going to go. And that's why we have to opt out if Obama does remain in office. There's no way that we can comply with the terms of Obamacare, whether he's in office or not, because as I said, it'll bankrupt our state. But ethics in government is a growing concern. because every day you hear of a new scandal. You hear of someone taking a bribe. You hear of someone awarding a contract. Even in North Myrtle Beach, we've got problems with contracts being awarded where there's no bid that is put out. Yet a city council member or two wind up with millions of dollars in contracts for the firms that they operate. It's not right. It's just not right, and I contend that in my election, that was one of the issues that helped, I say, get me reelected, but kept my opponent from being elected. We don't need to send someone from local government to a state office who has it in their head that they can use the office for personal gain. We don't deserve that, because when they start thinking like that, then they're using their time at hand to figure out how to profit from the office rather than how do we serve you better. If I represented this area, for instance, instead of figuring out how to get Highway 501 widened as it should have been by now, I'd be thinking of how do I profit tomorrow? And when someone does that and they're not thinking about the issues at hand, you are the ones that suffer. And I can't allow that to happen. I can't sleep at night if I were to allow it to happen. But that's why, as you see in the next few months into the next year or two, ethics will be a growing item that we will be looking at and considering in many different ways as to how to secure our government and make sure that those who seek to profit don't profit. It's to see that government is trusted by you, trusted by me, and looked upon by all as a model of what it should be. I'd love to take questions from you. I didn't mean to take up so much time already. If we don't have time to take too many questions, I'll stay around until the last person leaves. To sum up real quick, I've served in the House for 16 years. My family and I have enjoyed the service. It's a lot more than a part-time job, though, that pays $10,400 a year plus some other expenses. While we call it a part-time job, yesterday I was involved in getting 2 permits from the Department of Revenue. I had to find a bed in a mental health hospital to transfer a constituent to out of Seacoast Hospital who needed mental health help. Let's see, I think there are a couple other smaller issues, but just the things like that eat up several hours in a day. So it's more than a part-time job, but to have someone who will serve you, will answer your calls, will help solve the problems that you need is just invaluable. And that's why creating this new seat here in the Carolina Forest area is going to be very important for people in this area, because finally they'll have somebody who is waking up in the morning geared toward the needs in this area and will work day and night to solve the needs in this area. After Representative Byers had to resign, I offered in the press, and I'm glad that it got coverage, to serve the people in that district if they needed any help. If they had concerns, they could call me. If they had a problem, they could call me. And I wound up having a lot of people who did have needs and did have problems, and I'm glad that I could help them. Same thing though applies for any of you. With the books that you've got, and I think maybe the bio has my number on it too, you can call me anytime if you ever have a problem or a need or a concern, something that needs to be solved. Feel free to call. If my number's not on there, it's 424-9308. You can call me day or night. Like I said, I enjoy the job that I have. I hope to continue and keep it for a while. And I have a really good time solving problems that people come to me with, because I know that I've been able to help them on something that is the most important thing in their life at that given time. Again, the number is 424-9308. Questions?
Representative Edge, in your capacity as chairman of the healthcare subcommittee, I'm sure you were familiar with healthcare compacts and how that relates to South Carolina and with Obamacare and things of that nature. Could you take just a couple minutes and tell us about that? About
Well, you cut out.
Healthcare compacts. Could you just explain how that relates to the overall healthcare issues in South Carolina?
Compacts are relatively new in healthcare, particularly in our area. There have been a couple areas of concern. Unfortunately, healthcare is governed, I say unfortunate in this case, healthcare is governed along state lines, but you had professional organizations who could pool a lot of people together that were not allowed, say the South Carolina Association of Realtors, for instance. They couldn't provide coverage for their members by pooling with people in North Carolina or Georgia to form a compact specific to their industry. Federal law has kept that from happening. Under Obamacare, one possible way around having to fully implement Obamacare is to create a compact, if you will. That's probably not the proper, correct word for it, but it would allow South Carolina to provide coverage for this group of people without the restrictive mandates in the future that would come down the line from Obamacare. I don't know if that goes in the direction.
I guess my
you
real
want.
question is healthcare compacts a good thing for us, for the citizens of South Carolina?
Under existing law, yes, well, let me back up. The laws have changed over the past couple of years to allow professional organizations to unite across state lines. That part of it is good. If the compacts can be used to provide a relief valve to keep us from having to abide by some of the real egregious points of Obamacare, then it could be a good thing as well. The problem is that the law in that regard is shaky and shifting all the time. There's nothing solid that we deal with. The ever-changing law coming out of Washington is something that we contend with all the time, and that leads to us being unable, when it comes budget time, sometimes to make solid decisions, because Washington, for instance, has not been really good at providing direction for how we operate federal programs that are mandated yet left to the states. I know that's getting away from the subject, but to answer your question as best I can, the compacts can be a good thing, but the laws have got to change a little bit to allow them to proliferate the right way.
Thank you.
Representative Edge, before the legislative session closed,
just this past June, I watched the last 3 days of the Senate and and I have a hard time picking the right word to describe that because so many ugly words come to my head at the same time.
Sure.
It's been my feeling that in the last couple of years that the House has done a reasonably good job. Especially last year, I think there was a lot of good legislation passed. The problem, we need more conservative House members, but the problems that we're facing in the state right now are predominantly with the Senate. And the Senate rules really need to be changed this January. When you can have one senator, like Senator Matthews,
Sure.
Block school choice from coming up from to a floor vote, that's intolerable. That's unacceptable. We are not being represented by those people and their rules. And my question to you is, we have tried at the grassroots level to encourage candidates to run for the State House. We have been most successful in getting candidates to run for the House. Why is it that not more existing conservative members of the House are not running for Senate seats to get rid of some of these rhinos? It was deplorable to me how the Senate was rearranged. When Kennard was thrown out and they put McConnell in as lieutenant governor, that was a coup. To put Corson in as Senate pro tem And he was elected with something like 7 or 8 Republican votes, and all the rest of them are Democrats. Now I ask you, in January, when it comes to be appointing commission or committee chairman, is he going to be going and appointing the chairman from the people that voted against him?
Will McConnell?
Well, no, Corson.
Corson, I'm sorry.
Corson.
He has a district that is very scary for him.
Well, he's very scary to us.
Yeah. He has a very strong chance of being defeated. Very strong. Let me attack what you said in a couple of different ways. If you are bored one day and look at the Senate calendar, which lists the bills that are before them, under many of them there will be a line that says Senator Dugan desires to be present. What that really means is that Senator Dugan is standing in the way of taking that bill up, and we're not going to take it up until he says take it up and removes his name off of it. That goes back to horse and buggy days in the 1800s. Seriously, it does, where it was very hard to go from Horry County to Columbia. And if you had a bill that you wanted to be present for, it was courtesy at the time to hold the bill up until the senator, whoever asked for that courtesy to be extended, got into the chamber. Well, that courtesy is now changed to be a weapon. And now a bill is deemed blocked until that senator allows it to be unblocked. That senator can be in the chamber every day for a whole session and still not allow a bill to come up. So it has gotten away from the original purpose, which was noble, honest, sincere, and now it's a weapon that is used to defeat bills. In terms of what you asked about Senator Corson, yeah, he's in a district where he quite possibly could be defeated. As to why some senators tend to skate by, well, I'll take Senator Rankin, I guess, for an example here. Alan Clemens is right in the middle of that Senate district. He ran against Rankin in 1996 and got defeated in a landslide. So he probably would not feel like taking up the challenge. Also, Senator Rankin has 300 and some thousand in his campaign account. So for somebody to just wake up and start thinking about running for the office and maybe a couple of months later, after building toward that goal, decide to run, they have a looming challenge of how to defeat somebody that starts out with that much money. And that probably is reflected in other races throughout the state, or lack of races rather. And here in Horry County, I'll be honest with you, I regret not filing for the Senate in our area with Dick Elliott. And I've regretted that many, many days. So if I could do it over again, I probably would have filed to go in that direction, because though we have problems in the House with people who have switched parties and keep us from passing good legislation, the problem is really in the Senate. Several years ago, Mark Sanford had 16 bills that were his priorities, and near the end of session, the House had passed 15 of the 16. The Senate hadn't taken any of them up. So that is where the real problem is, for sure.
You got a question?
Am I coming through? One of the things that I want to say is I appreciate the information you've given us here. I didn't realize our state budget was in such a turmoil. But it does make me realize now why some of our politicians are transforming our law enforcement agencies into tax collectors. What can we do, and how can we approach our representatives to try to get some of that changed?
You know, I feel like when I started out in 1996, 97, to where we are today, there's a lot more voter contact, constituent contact that we have now compared to what we had back then. When I was elected, we didn't have the internet, didn't have email, didn't have the number of clubs, groups, organizations throughout the county that we have now. And I think the proliferation of different outlets that you have to get in touch with me or any other lawmaker has ultimately put some form of pressure on the lawmakers to well, listen to the people, which is what they should be doing to begin with, but it has increased the pressure that they not only should be listening, they will be listening, because you've got a number of ways to contact me that you didn't used to have. And do I want to walk into a meeting where I know that 10 or 12 people conceivably in that group have contacted me about a particular issue, and maybe my thoughts have been counter to theirs? No, I don't really want to do that. If I do, I need to be prepared to, I guess, to stand my ground in some respect and show you why I think, how I think. But when I first started out, we didn't have the knowledge available to people like you at all. Now you have tons of knowledge at your fingertips, and that makes you much more powerful by far than you ever used to be. So I think that makes lawmakers, they should at least, I think it makes them more attuned to what people are thinking. It makes them more attuned to, if they're not thinking in lockstep with their constituency, they need to be able to explain why. But I know that with a number of club meetings that I go to, and virtue of coming here tonight, I've got to remain and stay on my toes with particular issues. I can generally, I don't know, take a good guess at things that are on your mind, things that I've heard you talk about before, and having that bit of knowledge helps me operate in a way that's geared toward satisfying your concerns and working on those concerns. 15, 16 years ago, we just didn't have that information available to everybody. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I just do believe that technology that's been afforded to all people has helped keep people on their toes. I'll put it this way, I could have come here and talked about Bill 2034 and told you a bunch of stuff that I could just make up or say what you wanted to hear. Now I can't do that, because chances are you all have access to reading that bill from your cell phone. So the technology has been a big change and a big asset.
Last question.
Yeah, last question.
Yes, Representative Edge. In the aftermath of the, let's say, excitement of the election filing process that we just went through, who would we contact as regular citizens to have a request and input as to what type of fixes does the legislature need to make sure that when next time filing comes around, that incumbents and newcomers and challengers have exactly the same process to follow to the
I don't think anything needs to be said any further. I believe that's been made pretty loud and clear. And we don't know where that's going still. There are a number of issues that could still arise. I've even heard that the Election Commission itself could get involved in the process by refusing to certify winners at some point after the election. So there's a number of things, a number of different things that remain to be seen, a number of different court decisions that are still yet to be made. But I think ultimately what will happen is that we'll have one process that incumbents and non-incumbents follow. There doesn't need to be any more than one process. And it's just simple. The bill was sponsored by Governor Haley when she was in the House. Good intentions at the time, But going through all the steps of the process, the downsides just weren't thought about like they should have been. And unfortunately, you had somebody like Jake Knotts who used the bit of knowledge he had as a weapon and led us to where we are today. I say, had it not have been for him with the motive that he had, I don't think any of this would have been an issue like it's been blown up to be. I'll be here again, as I said, till the last person leaves, so be glad to talk to any of you. If any of you did not get a legislative manual that want one, just give me your name and address, and I'll see that you have one pretty soon. Thank you.
Okay.